First, I want to say thank you for coming, for taking the time to come and share this special day with us. Very important for us. I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati. He's a retired professor, a distinguished career. He has a long and distinguished career as both a scholar and an activist. He was one of the founding members of the African Studies Department at the University of Minnesota. Since 1974, he has been a faculty member in the History Department at Macalester College. He has authored and published numerous articles, several books, and memoirs, and continues to be a well-read columnist and popular speaker who is in great demand at local and regional colleges and universities. He is also a popular speaker for high school and community-based programs. We are very much grateful to have him here today with us, and to have him here to speak on our theme for this month in our celebration of Black History Month. Let justice roll down. Also, in this library, there will be, on Tuesday the 8th, there will be a Faculty Excellence Award for Dr. Roland King, presenting the quantum chemistry of this university and beyond. So, the library expects you guys to participate as well. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joe Boward, and I'm the director of the African American African Student Subgroup on campus. It's called Moyo. I'm also a nursing student, a junior nursing student. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. El-Kati. Please, let's give him a round of applause.
Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Heard that expression? Television commercial? John Lee Hooker, old blues singer. Boom, 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 boom. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's nice to be here once again. I've been in campus in the last year or two several times. Most recently about 6 weeks ago, you know, for the departure of Ahmed. And this is a tricky place to come to, I want to tell you. I've been in this building I don't know how many times, and I almost always get lost. I don't know where I am. It's a wonderful facility. Sure it is. The architects knew what they were doing to put it together. It's just that I can't figure it out. I need a guide. You know. Well, I want to tell you that I'm really very, very glad to be here. Is this thing on?
It's not.
Just check your pocket.
Oh, I don't know anything about anything. It's on. Is it on now? I want you to hear me in the back. And I won't be long. I won't keep you long. I won't keep you long. Let's put it that way. And I've tried to compress what I had to say, what I have to say, and hopefully leave a moment or two for you to ask a question, which is a critical one to speak to. Many and all times, the question of justice. Everybody wants to be dealt with justly. There's no human beings who don't want to be dealt with fairly. I'm going to, which I do not generally do, is, in the interest of time, read something that I wrote to try to tailor it for this discussion. Joe asked me to speak from the theme selected from the Bible in Amos. still not on. Amos. It's
That's me. Oh, almost. Yeah. Yeah. Brother. Yeah. In chapter 5, verse 24. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. That happens to be Dr. Martin Luther King's favorite quote from the Bible, from Amos. And that is, in fact, what he saw himself doing, is to bring justice to the land. But I'm going to try to capsulize that. First, talk a little bit about justice itself and what that means. The word justice will always imply the rendering of something that is merited, something that is rightly given, rightly deserved. Justice means equity, which means equal treatment, fairness, and impartiality. In theological terms, justice is an attribute of God and of his laws and judgment. This is how Martin Luther King saw justice. To him, justice is more than an abstract principle by which right and wrong is defined. Justice, he thought, must reign over all, in every sphere of life. And as to the code of laws established by secular rulers, is a different kind of question. The laws of God and man are a different set of laws. The laws of God is just. In the secular world, there's unjust and just laws. And Martin claims that unjust law is like no law at all. The just law must affirm human personality. It was in his view, that is to say, what is morally right, thank you, justice is morally right. Unjust laws are not. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not used to reading anything. I'm an extemporaneous speaker, so this is very difficult for me. And I just wrote it especially for you. In a word, this question of justice, of social justice, is the theme of African American struggle in America for liberty and equality before the law. In Martin Luther King's eloquent and soaring language, in his letter from a Birmingham jail, which I think is his greatest statement, he spells out his meaning of justice as commanded by the tenets of his faith, Christianity. It's driven by the Judeo-Christian love ethic. Dr. King identifies with the ancient prophets of the Bible, which is replete with cries for social justice. his teaching was also in keeping with this theme, social justice. It's a profound theme in Black American struggle. He inherited part of that from his predecessors, the black people, the black clergy, who preached the prophetic, out of the prophetic tradition of the Bible. And that's a real distinction between black preaching and white preaching. I don't mean anything genetic about that. I'm talking about culture, tradition. It's not transmitted by genes, but it's by experience. It's a lived experience. And when we saw the prophetic tradition on television a few years ago during Barack Obama's campaign for president, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, spoke from that prophetic tradition. Through the whole thing of speak truth to power in biblical terms. You question the big house, Pharaoh. You condemn the big house. That's your moral obligation. And so it was talking about America, you know, as an entity, a political reality for more than 230 odd years now. You see, students, one of the things you got to be faced with, and other generations have just shunned, and that is that every nation on the planet has a model of itself. And that model of itself is false. Every nation has ideals. The question is, ideals more often than not are contradicted by reality, by pragmatic power. Example, all men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. You agree with that? That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I almost said the pursuit of property, which is what John Locke said, where Jefferson borrowed that from him, made it a little more aesthetic, you know, with happiness. This property was the original statement that comes from his mentor, John Locke. Now you can see that's appealing. If I ask you the question, you know, that all men are endowed by the creed, all men and women, I'm adding that to Jefferson. He didn't think about women, I don't think. But are endowed by their creed with certain inalienable rights. I mean, that's awesome. That's inspiring. You down with that, aren't you? I am. Who would disagree with that? It inspired the world. It's still inspiring the world. The shot that was fired that was heard around the world. The American Revolution. Those are the words that generated that kind of courage and sensibility to come up against the giant empire in the world. You know, England. I mean, this empire was so vast that the sun never set on it. I almost said, but I won't say. Thank God. You know, the sun never sat on the British Empire. And I think, I'm happy to say that now the sun can't find the British Empire. It's because it's gone. It's good. The death of imperialism, of colonialism. That's a good thing. In a human term. Jefferson would support that. That's a good thing, that we are free from some monarch. We make decisions on our own. For ourselves, we are men with beating hearts and living affections, not just King George. He said that, or he wrote that, and inspired half of the world. Yet Thomas Jefferson, that same man, at the time he wrote that, denied human freedom to over 250 men, and women, and children. They were called slaves. I know Americans don't like that. But folk, we got to grow up. That's what it means. That's a contradiction between American ideals and the reality of practical power. And that is what we live out of, you and I. This is the contradiction. You believe that, you know, that we believe in equality and justice and so forth. I mean, you could say that in the abstract, but when you apply it to life, you got to deal with reality, political reality, living in a political economy, which is about power. And the enslavement of African people had a lot to do with power, economic power, the source of his wealth, the source of Washington's wealth, the source of Madison's wealth, who wrote the Constitution, they say. I wasn't there. Katie Kirk wasn't there either, so I don't know. This is crucial that we come to grips with stuff like that. You know, it's a thing that you ought to read some of these people that you don't read in a regular curriculum. But I remember a statement that was made by in a debate between William F. Buckley. You've heard of him? Oh, he's the high priest of conservatism. He started all this stuff. He generated what we call modern conservatism. Nobody heard of William Buckley? William F. Buckley. See, this is what makes me want to just hit my head against the wall. He had a television program for 30 years called Firing Line on the Educational Channel. He wrote 53 books. He was a columnist for about 30 years. It's nationally syndicated columnist. He's a brilliant man, a conservative. I mean, a real, don't get him confused with the Tea Party. I'm talking about people who deal with some values, you know, which I didn't agree with, but they weren't grounded in the mean stuff so much. Well, somebody like Buckley is a representative of what Jefferson thought about a lot of things. And that's why both liberals and conservatives claim Jefferson, you know, small government and so forth. At the same time, he believed in human freedom for everybody. So both of them claim it, the left and the right claim Jefferson. But Buckley was a guy who was in a debate with Huey P. Newton. You ever heard that name? He's the founder of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Brilliant! I mean, you know, with a half-street education, he eventually went to college and got a PhD. But then Buckley was in a discussion about what I'm talking to you about. He said, look, Mr. Buckley, the principal law of nature is contradiction. You can't look at the world like you. He's telling Buckley the way you do. The principal law of nature is contradiction. And you can't create outside of contradiction. That's what Dr. King taught. Creating tension. I want to make it tense. I want to confront segregation. Head on. Create some tension. And we will have, that's contradictions. Segregation and the civil rights movement for human freedom, that's a contradiction. And he confronted, you know, you've heard of segregation. All right, I'm departing from what I want to say because I don't know anymore. That was a formal legal system of racism. And by racism, I mean white supremacy. That's what racism means. It doesn't mean anything about black supremacy or Indian supremacy or anything. No, it's white supremacy, the doctrine of white supremacy that created the institutions which impose racism on people. That's what racism is. It's largely an institutional phenomenon. It's not interpersonal. It's not I don't like you because you're white. You don't like me because you're black. That's individual. It has no human or personal grounding. It has grounding in politics and power. That's what racism is. It determines who gets what, when, and how much. It is no accident that things stack the way it is. When you look at the social index of whoever who's educated, healthcare, and so forth, I know who's going to end up at the bottom. Taught in prisons. I know who's in prison. And I know what they're in prison for. And I'm not a great prognosticator to have any personal insight. That's something you could observe from common sense. When I go to prison, I know who makes up most of the prisons. Black people, Hispanics, Native Americans. Now, a few, I don't know how they got in this, Asians are showing up in the prison population. You know, and I know what they're there for. And a lot of it is structured in poverty and racism. Dr. King argued the triple evils of racism, poverty, and war. You have to tackle three of them at the same time because they're intrinsically related to one another. Racism, poverty, and war. His argument was for social justice. Let justice roll down like righteousness and waters like a mighty stream. That's a part of the heritage of the black clergy as represented by Jeremiah Wright the other day. And folks were dishonest. The new media was dishonest. People like Dan Rather and people, Tom Brokaw, they grew up covering the civil rights movement. You can see them in their old footage. They've heard black preachers talk like that before. I've said worse things about America than Jeremiah Wright. People say, yeah, terrible. He was quite polite. King said that this government under whose laws I live is the greatest purveyor of violence on the face of the earth. And he was right in 1967. Where did he say it? In a church. Who did he say it to? Rich white people. Riverside Church. Never heard of it? It was at that time the richest church in America, founded by the Rockefeller family. Never heard of Riverside? Okay. Here we go. Part of our problem are the gaps in information, caused by information. Too much information overwhelms fundamental things that people should know. I'm happy you're twittering and twattering and whatever. But you got to be. I don't think that's much growth going on. You understand? When I talk to a news reporter, a television reporter during the last month, the King observance, and the ladies wonder, what do you know about it? And I said, this is what I know, I understand, and so forth. Oh, incidentally, what did he die? Was it 1980 or 81? These are people who are informing us. And the only thing I regret is I hung up to, I was very angry, yes I was, that I didn't call the management and ask, hey, you need to fire her. She's useless. You should know that. You can. Look, that's too long a gap between 1968 and 1981. And there's this person, very intelligent. I'm sure she was flushed out of one of those highfalutin journalist schools, Columbia, Missouri, Northwestern. Big knowledge gap. Don't know what she's talking about. That's a big problem. That a lot of people in positions of authority who are supposed to be teaching us and sharing haven't a clue because they have no respect for history, number one. They are ahistorical and sometimes they are anti-historical. I don't want to know if you're going to talk about slavery, I'm out of here. And I contend you can't understand America until you understand that institution, which lasted longer than any institution created in America. It was here before the Constitution, before Jefferson and Washington were born. It was here since Jamestown settled. And you don't know anything about it. So you can't explain black people. You can explain no human beings without the historical process. But we try to do it, as if they appeared by spontaneous combustion, just showed up in the ghetto. no history, no background, never, always in the ghetto. Black people have been victimized by that doctrine of white supremacy, thinking this is the community, the black people, historical community. Black people are people of the soil, basically. Worked the soil for 250 years. Created the foundations of this vast economic empire 200 years before the weak hands of white people could have done it. Created the social wealth. You know what that is? Cotton, tobacco, sugar, rice. Those were the major cash crops in the world, in the global market back then. Came from the sweat and sinews of black people's bodies. But you don't know anything about that. You never heard of black people in any other role except what you see on television, these fake things. Now they got black people in every other program, a black cop is in it. You know, it's kind of tricky, because, on the side of the law, when in fact the law was structured against the existence of African Americans. You have to say that. You have to have some moral courage. If it's true, don't make up anything. Don't lie, like generations have been doing. Lie about it. You can't do that anymore. I'm telling you, that's not the kind of world we live in anymore. Somebody's got to have to, in America, has got to understand the complexity, human weight and complexity of the United States of America. The first thing you got to disabuse yourself of is this is now, never has been a white country. You got to, I know that doesn't sound good. It's true. Why would you keep saying things that are not true? You know, when John Smith and John Wolfe, at least this much, they came to Pocahontas' land. They came to the Powhatans. They superimposed, King James, Jamestown, first settlement. Named the place Virginia after the Virgin Queen. That's what visitors supposed to have been, a Virgin Queen. So they corrupted the word into Virginia. This has always been a quote, this is not my bag, race, I think it's nonsense. But anyway, races, as to colors and so forth. It's always been multicultural. It was multicultural among Native Americans. There's no Native American like that one people with one language, one religion, one way of eating food and so forth. There were 600 different ways to be a Native American in this country. Just like there were hundreds of ways of being a person who lived in Europe, or European, now we call white. Bavarian is not a Hessian or a Prussian or whatever, All this, that's phony stuff. It's all caused by race, where people identify themselves and their realities through the eyes of race. When in fact, this history and culture will give you a better understanding of any group of people, of who they are. The who-ness of me is not the way I look. The who-ness of you is not the way you look. I've been around the world a little bit. There are a lot of people who look like me, but they ain't me. There's only one African American on the planet. And there are a lot of black people, with African roots in the diaspora. There's only one. Jimmy Baldwin says the Negro is a unique American creation. He has no counterpart anywhere and no predecessors. Never anybody. We're African people, to be sure. But some stuff that's happened to black people in America that's never happened to any other African people anywhere on this planet. We're scattered all over this hemisphere. In Brazil, they got as much African in them as Yoruba, still in Nigeria. The food, the colors, the religion has changed. Shango is right there, mixed with Catholicism. And they respected the Brazilians, more or less. Castro, to his everlasting credit, defined Cuba as an Afro-Latino nation. People say Latino. That's kind of white supremacy. That's African. I mean, the music is African. Much of the food is African and Native American. All over this hemisphere. And so we have this false consciousness that this is a white country and anything that's not white is out of order. Somebody's out to lunch and I don't think it's me. I mean, this doesn't make sense. That's what ideology will do. If you really want to understand, you know, the Islamic thing and how people have tunnel vision, you know, they don't see this, that, or the other. Check your own history. You see that same mentality. It's white on white on white on white. And nothing black people can do to change people's minds as long as they're tied to that ideology. That's what Dr. King was fighting. Nothing you could do. You know, I mean, even whites, and I don't want to sound like you can't demonize people. There's no such thing as white man and woman, to me, in reality. There's groups of people, we don't even get into this kind of stuff, who are bound to certain values, traditions, and ideologies which cause them to behave that way. It's taught. But it was not for their land that they fought. It was a land which rather oppressed than protected them. Bravery under such circumstances has a peculiar and beautiful merit. Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife, you know, the second president of the United States, what was she referring to? The 5,000 black people in the patriotic army who helped this country win its freedom. Nobody knew black people were in the Revolutionary War. You never heard of Prince Hall, Tax Sisson, Prince Whipple, who crossed the Delaware with Washington. You don't know who these people are. She was there. And half of them were slaves. Some of them were called freedmen. That was an uneasy position that black people had as a legal position. She just said, bravery under such circumstances, a land which oppressed them, and they helped gain the freedom of the land. Chapter, you don't know. Where is justice? Let me say this lastly, because I don't want to take up all the time. I don't know. Dr. King is a representative of the struggle for social justice. I claim that. He's our best representative. There are only a few. He and Gandhi, and a man who did not create a mass movement, Henry David Thoreau. Yes. It's a powerful influence on Martin Luther King. You know Henry David Thoreau, right? Come on, English guys. You know, Walden Pond. The world was so complicated, too many machines. He said, simplify, simplify, simplify. So he went away from civilization, so to speak. He ought to be here now. He think it was complicated then. But he was a powerful influence on King's thinking about civil disobedience. The difference between Dr. King and Thoreau is he put it on a mass level. He and Gandhi. Thoreau was like an American individualist. It's a bad law. I'm against slavery and the Mexican-American War and whatever. I'm not supporting it. So you're going to go to jail. So be it. I'm not with that. Influenced the thinking of Dr. King. Of course, Gandhi influenced his thinking. He studied in India for about 6 weeks after Gandhi was dead. Any number of black people, his teacher, Benjamin Mays, his mentor, his spiritual and intellectual mentor, met and talked with Gandhi in the 1930s. Any number of black people talked to the president of Howard University. A whole delegation in 1936 or 7 went to have spent some time with Mahatma Gandhi, and he made the prediction that someone from among yourselves, you don't know who that is, will lead you out of this condition that you're in. Because India resembled America. You know, they had a caste system. They say it's religious. Here it was racial. A caste system, my young friend, is womb-to-womb reality, a womb to graveyard. You're stuck. You can't change your status. If you're a slave, you're a slave for life, and so will your children, and your children, and your children. Black people have been released from that condition for a little less than 4 generations. People think slavery is way, way, way back. It's not true. Those old people around my grandmother, Miss Lucy and those people, I grew up around old people, and I'm lucky for that. I didn't know that at the time. When they were children, they were slaves. So I talked to people who've been slaves. I didn't know that. Let me tell you something. Anybody in this country who is black, this is a probability, and reached the age of 60 or so, a little more, his great-grandparents were slaves. My mother grew up in a house with 4 generations. She, her mother, her grandmother, and her great-grandmother, who died when she was 14. And 2 born into slavery, 2 born into freedom. They just left us. We live in the shadow of slavery. But you can't talk about it because it was such a long time ago, way back there with Egypt, you know where. This is what is twisted. That's ideology to twist white people's mind. And I'm saying, you know, I'm not talking about the guys you see on television and the Klan and so forth. I'm talking about intellectuals. I'm talking about bright people. You see, well, bright people don't do that. Because you bright doesn't mean you good. Hitler surrounded himself with the brightest people in Germany. Yes, he did. Who do you think was around his Adolf Hitler? University professor, medical doctors, leaders of the military, intellectual writers and so forth, Goebbels and Goebbels, everything. These are bright people. So I start with racism with the American intelligentsia because they created it. They wrote the books, the 500-page tracts, and taught people that you're superior to other people by dint of your appearance. That's insane. All you have to do is look a certain way. You can be a classical idiot, but you're better than everybody else. That's wrong, folks. That's a moral question. It's not simply political. You know, we know what the politicians, that's a moral question. That's a question of conscience. Do you really believe that you're innately, inherently better than human beings because they're not like you? Well, there's some people who do. Or claim they do. Lastly, Frederick Douglass was a giant for social justice. Anybody heard of Frederick Douglass? Ooh, thank you. Here's how he took it. He was an abolitionist. One of the great minds of the 20th century. Taught himself to read, slave until he was 21 years old. Not only did he master the English language, he mastered 4 other languages. He spent 2 years in Europe, founded a newspaper, became a minister to Haiti for the United States government. He was the Grand Marshal of Washington, D.C., a statesman. Abraham Lincoln had enormous respect for him. When he did his second inaugural address, he wanted Douglass to hear it, even though it was just after the Civil War had ended. He made this, malice toward none and that kind of speech. You never heard of that. And Douglass was in the audience on the French, and he asked Douglass to come. He wanted him to hear the speech. When Douglass went around after the speech to go into the White House, they wouldn't let him in, obviously. And he told him, tell the president that Frederick Douglass is here as he requested. And they finally let him in. And when he got into the building, it was a hallway and some people were surrounding the president. He happened to see Douglass walking down the hall. And he told the people, excuse me, went to Douglass, said, I want to sit down and talk to you. They went into a room to themselves and said, why I asked you to come was, I want you to tell me what you thought of my speech. And he said, Mr. President, it was a graceful moment. That speech, better than the Gettysburg Address, because he did mention injustice. And he grace. It's a graceful moment. See, you don't know these two men knew one another. So if I want to put Frederick Douglass in the book, I don't mean to take Lincoln out. I want both of them in the book. Why do I want Douglass in the book? Because he belongs there. That's simple. But if you have a racist mentality, you know, and you're ingrained and it's affected your lives emotionally, that's hard to handle because it violates the American narrative of white supremacy. That's hard to handle. Douglass and Abraham Lincoln, Lincoln met with several contingents of black ministers. You'll never see that in a Hollywood movie. Never. So Douglass said this: I'm for any movement, where there is a cause, a just cause to promote, a right to be asserted, a burden to be lifted, a chain to be broken, and a wrong to be redressed. In the struggle for social justice, the only reward is to be in the struggle. That's the reward. What was he talking about? He found in the newspaper called the North Star. On his masthead, there was one slogan: truth is of no color. Anti-slavery statement. And the other part started is right is of no sex. He was a leading male figure in the women's rights movement of the 19th century. Everybody knows that, but these feminists, he was a major figure. He was at Seneca Falls. He was a keynote speaker with Lucretia Martin, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony were there. He was there. Those are the people who brought his freedom when he was in here. Were largely white women. The last public address he made in Washington, D.C. was to white women. And he went home and died the next morning. I think that's important for you to know, so you can unravel some of this madness. Truth is of no color, right is of no sex. Women should have every right that men have. He said that over and over and over again. And he was a slave. Obviously, he had some insight into oppression. He had some insight that the average American male would not have. Dr. King argued that what justice denied anywhere is justice denied everywhere. Justice denied anywhere is justice denied everywhere. In the face, he said that in the face of the opposition which opposed the human rights movement in America for democracy. Dr. King believed, watch this, as the founding father Thomas Jefferson believed, that slavery was an exercise of the most boisterous passions, of unremitting despotism on the one hand and degrading submissions on the other. It teaches white children to be tyrants after the pattern of their parents. It destroys the will to work in white men. And above all, it robs man of God's greatest gift, and that is the gift of liberty. Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and that his justice cannot sleep forever. That's Jefferson talking about justice, just as King. You know, this man was trapped between the devil and the deep blue sea. He was quite aware of the contradiction, but he was trapped by it. What do you think of slavery? It's like holding a wolf by the ear. You can't hold on. Now can you let it go? We trapped. We never resolved the contradiction. And that's what brought about the Civil War. Got it? The Civil War is what brought about the Civil Rights Movement. You know, are you with me? No, no, you ain't. That's okay. That's what Malcolm X used to say when he had the crowd going. He said, can you understand me? They said, yeah, Malcolm. He said, oh, no, you don't. Because you don't hear this. But it's quite penetrated. You know what to do with these kind of words, this kind of stance. You know? And I'm the kind of person, you know, who certain American people do not like. And I'm glad. I only want to be liked by the people on the side of justice. I do not wish to be liked by racists. Get that clear. If we lived in a free country, you know, where you could have real free association, the last people I would be around was these people who think they're better than I am. I wouldn't want to swing with them. They're too square. They don't know that a man is a man, a woman is a woman, and a child is a child. They don't know that there's more than one way to be a human being. They don't know that. So I don't want to swing with them. You know what I mean? Not because they're white. Because they're a drag, man. You know, in the development of human beings. I do not want to be around racists. That doesn't mean I think I'm better than them in something. I just don't around any madness, you know, because it's catchy. It's like a disease. Okay, I didn't mean to make you that sober, but that's what I wanted to say to you. And I've been saying this, or doing this Black History Month, not only, but emphasizing this. You know, we got the moment, the ear of the people for a minute. We just in February, and you won't hear from me again until next February. That's the way it goes. This isn't something you deal with every day in your studies. It's just a celebration. That's true of black people too. They're not interested during the other months. And when I say black people, let me make this crystal clear. I'm not really talking about genetics. That's a peculiar experience of African people in the modern world within the last 500 years. That's when the world that we know was invented. You know what I mean? When it was triggered by one man. You know what that was? When Chris got lost. Remember Chris? Christopher Columbus. He was lost. He triggered this whole thing. Slavery, imperialism, all that white supremacy, all came together. The enslavement of black people based on only the color of their skin, unheard of in Greece and Rome and in Egypt and anywhere else where there were multi-racial societies. Nobody was picked out because of their skin color. You own a person's labor, not their person. Slavery is old when the world was young. There's nothing new about enslavement. But there is something new about this. Alexis de Tocqueville said that among the ancients, slavery was an abstract and transient fact. But in the United States, it became federally united to the permanent and physical fact of color. And now people think of slave, they think of black people. The word slave comes from Slavs. These are people who live in Eastern Europe. They were subjugated by the West and the East for centuries, you know, Attila the Hun and everybody else. And they began to call people in English language slaves because they were like Slavs. What? Subjugated by other people. Well, thank you for listening. You have been relatively tolerant, patient ears to put up with this. But I do thank you for your attention.
Thank you.